This is reporter Julie Spencer, and I'd like to welcome you to Newsline Iowa City. Please join me today as we visit the African American Museum in Cedar Rapids. Museum Educational Director Michelle Poe will talk about and take us on a tour of their latest exhibit, Western Africa Before the Boats.
Well, this is the African American Museum of Iowa's 2013-2014 exhibit called Western Africa Before the Boats. And the idea here, there's a proverb that says, however far a stream flows, it never forgets its origin. We really wanted to build an exhibit that would focus on what life was like in West Africa before the slave trade. West Africa, because when we trace the heritage of African Americans in the United States today, if we go back to a time period when African Americans were enslaved, most of those people find their ancestry traces back to West Africa. That's where most slaves were coming from. So we wanted to take a look at what Africa was like 400 years ago, 500 years ago, and see the influences of what we do in the United States today that we do because people did those things 500 years ago in West Africa. We wanted to look at their influence on music and architecture and farming and all of these other pieces of our lives, and then also to take a look at what their lives were like. We wanted to really just celebrate the cultures and all of these other pieces of West Africa. So our exhibit opens in a tropical rainforest. And these are some beautiful murals that were done by a local artist named Jeannie Reeves. When she painted these, did a tremendous amount of research. So all of the plants, all of the animals have a story. If there's a butterfly sitting on a tree, it's because that butterfly sources its food from somewhere near there. So our rainforest starts out very thick and very dense. This picture at the back wall here is actually of a garden that you would have found in West Africa. And that would have been a natural clearing. That would have been a place where there were usually rock beneath the soil, so that way the trees can't grow as deeply, and so it would have been this big open space. And that's where, if you lived in West Africa, that's where you would have built your home until you turn the corner and you're in a village. This particular village would have been in Ghana. So this would have been part of the Ghanaian Empire. Ghana was very, very wealthy in gold. It had a lot of gold as a resource. So it was able to trade, and it traded primarily in salt. It was a salt and gold trade going across Africa, the northern portion, but it also, people here could have traded for ivory or for pottery or for clothing or even for slaves. And so this Ghana Empire grew and grew until it became a very grand kingdom. Everyone in here is doing something, either they're playing a game or they're making food. We have some gentlemen right here who are playing, we call it in the United States, mancala. We've got a mom and a daughter, where mom is showing the daughter how to carry a pot on her head. That's not really something we do in the United States today, but that's something that is more done in Africa. And it makes sense. That pot would have been very big and very heavy. And if you're carrying that in your arms, then your arms are going to get tired and they're going to start to drag. But if you put that on top of your head, your whole body is carrying that weight. There's a little boy in the corner. He is weaving on a loom. He's just sort of learning how to do that. It's a very small, simple loom. But if you look at the clothing of the people in this picture, it was a very complicated pattern to weave kente cloth. And so as soon as children were able to, they were learning how to do that to see if that was a skill that they could help their community with. In the center of our mural, we have these two gentlemen. There are two figures front and center. The way they're dressed says a lot about them. The gentleman on the left, he's wearing a necklace that would have been made out of cowrie shells. Cowrie shells were sometimes used as currency, so it's almost like he has a money necklace on, and then he has a gold ring on his finger. So that tells us that he's wealthy. The gentleman on the right, he does not have either of those things, but his kente is worn a little differently. It's poofed up big on his shoulder and it drags large down his arm. He's trying to seem taller and broader than he is in real life. And that says to me that he's a warrior. He's going to be someone who's trying to protect his community. There also is a wealth of food throughout West Africa that varies depending on where you're going to live. If you live in the desert, you're going to be able to get millet or sorghum. This is millet inside here. It's little tiny, almost pieces of grain, and you can grind that up and you can turn it into flour. You can turn it into a food like oatmeal. So this is going to be pretty much what you're going to be able to get in somewhere so dry. But as you get to areas like the steppe where it rains more, you're going to be able to grow. These are cowpeas. Here in the United States, we call them black-eyed peas. You can grow that and things that require a little more water. And then once you start entering the savanna and the rainforest, you're going to have greater access to fruits. You're going to be able to get mangoes and bananas. You're going to be able to grow maize. We also have some fabulous African pottery. These pieces are from Liberia. They were donated to us by James and Mary Evans. There's a very large serving bowl here. We also have a little bowl, and that would have been something that you could use as a means when you're traveling. And then the piece that I think is most interesting to me, is this double spouted pot. That would have been something that would hold palm wine. And the idea is that you would have that at a wedding. So there's a spout on either side. That way the bride and the groom could each drink from the same pot and be able to share that wine together to celebrate their marriage. And we talked about the meanings of clothing inside that mural with those African gentlemen and with those Ghanaian gentlemen. Clothing in other regions is also, it's made similarly. It's also very bright and colorful depending on where you are. This piece here would have been aso-oke cloth, or is aso-oke cloth, and this would have come from Nigeria. Pottery was something that was very important. African pottery, though, traditionally was not fired in a kiln. It would have been fired like this. You would have made your pot out of clay that you got from the land, and then you would have made a way to fire it where you would have put grasses or leaves or dung or pieces that would fire inside the pot, light that, and then light the extremities of it, like the outside. Which makes so the pot will fire and will become stable, but it's not quite as long lasting as if it's fired in a kiln. Have some pieces on display that people can touch that were fired in a kiln, that were made in a similar design and pattern to those you would have found in West Africa. But the traditional pieces, like we saw a few minutes ago, have to be kept in a case. Those can't actually be touched. We also have some interesting pieces over in this case. And I think the one that I will show or talk about primarily is the little guy who looks like he's eating a corn cob inside there. That would have been a weight. And that was something that was made to give to a couple traditionally as a wedding gift, although anyone anywhere could get them. And the idea there is Ghana was very, very wealthy in gold, the Ghanaian Empire. And so if you took a weight like that to a market and you put it on one of those scales where if you put something on one side it dips low and the other side raises, then you could put your gold on the other side, and once those two sides were equal, once your gold dust matched the weight of the figure that you had, you would know how much money's worth of gold you were getting ready to barter for. In this area we talk about music, and I already mentioned that music was so intertwined with life in West Africa that for a long time there was no word for music. Music was something that was part of getting your work done. It was part of celebrating, a way of expressing yourself. I always tell people it's very much the same way we use music here today. We play the radio while we do our work or get chores done. We have songs that are special to certain ceremonies. Our coming of age ceremony, if we think of it that way, every year we have a small one called a birthday party, and we have a song traditional to that. Weddings have songs that are traditional to them. So it's sort of the same idea with what's happening in West Africa. We've got some really great African instruments in here, and I'll show you a few of those. This one is called a kalimba, and this is a thumb piano. This kalimba is made out of a gourd. So sometimes they're made out of wood, sometimes they're even made out of metal pieces. This one is made out of a gourd, and it has a hole in the center here, and you strike the ends of these keys with your thumb, and you play songs with them. I can't actually play a song, but I can show you how it works. And then you can change, if you press on these in different spots, sometimes you can mute the sound or alter the sound. I've also seen people shake them and make music with it that way. Another interesting instrument is this one. This is a talking drum. And this would have been originated from Nigeria. And it looks like you would play this like a guitar, but actually these slices are attached to the surface. And when you pull on them very tightly, it's going to stretch the top of this a lot more tightly. It's going to change the tension on the surface there. And that tension is going to change the sound. And you play this by putting it underneath your arm. And if you squeeze really tight, it sounds like this. And if you let that go so those are loose, it sounds like this. And the idea is to move your arm up and down to change the sound while you're playing. The idea behind calling this a talking drum, I've heard two different reasons for that name. One is that it makes so many sounds, it's almost like a human voice. And the other one I was told is that if you are from Nigeria or you're from a region where this is played very commonly, these can almost tell you a story. Listening to the music will give you a feel for the message the musician is trying to portray. So both reasons I've heard for why it's called a talking drum. We'll show this one too. This is called a kora, and a kora is an instrument that looks like a guitar. It looks like you'd hold it and you'd strum it like a guitar, but it's actually played more like a harp. So you would set it in front of you and then you would pluck the strings. And there are very, very large ones that are very nicely tuned, as opposed to ours, which is, children have been playing with it. So this is a little smaller and not quite as fancy as some koras get, but this would be played like a harp, and it's another really great instrument found in West Africa. And then over here we have our wall of drums. There are actually, what we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drums in the exhibit if we count the talking drum. And this one on the end is a djembe. It looks like an hourglass. And a djembe was used hundreds of years ago as a form of communication. So the idea was that before there's a cell phone, before there's the phone in general, or the internet or any of these ways of communicating long distances, you could use your drum to communicate. So if you played something on it that meant it's time to come for dinner, and you were out hunting or you were out gathering, you would hear that and you would know it was time to come back. It was also a way, depending on how close together some of these villages or homes were, that you could communicate with people over long distances. So you could play this and say, we need to have a meeting, or let's talk, or something along those lines, and someone further away would hear that and they could play the sound, or as a warning even. They would play that sound and then the person who was further out might repeat it. Because of this, when African Americans are coming to the United States and working as slaves, slave owners forbade the use of drums. Most places that was absolutely not allowed because they didn't want them to be able to communicate from one farm to the other. And they realized the drum would accomplish this. So if you watch sort of the evolution of music, as African Americans are in the United States, they're finding other ways to make percussion because they're not allowed to use these instruments. And I'll show you the one on the end here. This is that Ghanaian drum that we saw in our exhibit. It has these beautiful carvings on it. Sometimes they have symbols with special meanings, and it has these pegs here that is pulling that surface taut, pulling that piece across there. So this is the drum that is specific to Ghana, whereas the djembe we just saw you could find throughout West Africa. So this was a tour of Western Africa before the boats, the African American Museum of Iowa's 2013-2014 exhibit. This will be closing at the end of March in 2014, so you're welcome to visit us until then. Our hours are Monday through Saturday from 10 until 4, and we would love it if you came by. You saw all those drums, come, give a chance to play. We say they're for the kids, but the grown-ups like playing them too. And then you have a chance to really explore what life was like in West Africa.